Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is our closing session after that fantastic group photo from all angles of sustainability. So what we would like to do is have a summary from the two groups, and how about if we give the floor first to Inge to report on her group, and then in about 5 minutes, and then we go to Janos for about 5 minutes. Then I'll say a couple of words to summarize, or maybe go first.
You will say a couple of words to summarize, and then a couple of words to summarize. Okay,
and then finally, I think Marta, as the host, will give us the final blessing, and right? So, please, Inge.
Okay. We were 6 countries from the Western Balkans: Serbia, Albania, Macedonia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Kosovo. And we looked at the questions in the outline and thought we addressed them in the reverse order. And in the end, of course, it was more countrywide and interlinked. Nicely interlinked, actually, and we were able to distill kind of 5 messages, and maybe then there came more underpinning from written contributions. So in any report we can put the underpinnings, the more rich aspects, lessons learned across those. And the 5 messages were, the first actually came from a breakfast brainstorming we had already, and that was then confirmed across the board that the EU accession process should definitely also include and address and include capacity building for enforcement, as opposed to only looking at legal transpositions. And the message was also the observation the UN is talking about the SDGs across the board, but the EU not yet. So that would be a take-home message. EU, we are waiting, that you are also addressing the SDGs. A good message was that apparently the DG neighborhood, they already had them in a guidance paper as early as end of 2014. So that is a good news for the inter-service task force in the Commission to come. Just then the comment on this, on the first message, that it's typically the legal persons in charge with this accession process in terms of transposition of the acquis. So there I see a challenge, or we see a challenge for within the Commission, that the legal persons also need to be made aware of the SDGs and or be grouped with people dealing more with this policy side. The second message was around, insight, let's say, is around the issue of prioritization. It was widely shared, yes, that all SDGs has to be considered by all countries and kind of mainstreamed in the existing governance programs and strategies. The term gap analysis, or this approach gap analysis, is apparently already known. That came up in one particular context. And with such gap analysis, there will then be priorities emerging, preliminary criteria. These criteria are where are big leverage opportunities. So what are areas where you could achieve a lot with prioritizing that in the work, and then obviously also where is my country most lagging. And for the former, that was an issue we discussed quite lengthy, and the conclusion is, and the message is, that education is kind of a must-do, and something like a low-hanging fruit. I mean, we acknowledge the challenges to get sustainable development in a traditionally conservative actor group. So it was addressed, for example, that existing teachers are typically quite resistant to learn new things, but it is less, I mean, we identified 2 steps that sustainable development has to get into curricula in all levels, and it has to get in university education. And this particular challenge is of teaching existing teachers, but the good news, of course, is they are growing new teachers that are educated in university. So once you have this, well, once you are through, it is a self-runner, and therefore, and in terms of future generations, it's really obvious that this is a must-do. And in terms of capacity that needs to be put on compared to other things like infrastructure investments, it is a relatively low-hanging fruit. The 4th message is that there is really across the board in all these countries rich experience with the challenge of horizontal coordination between line ministries on the one hand side, so on the government side, horizontal coordination, there's experience with interministerial working groups, task forces, what have you. There's experience with what was referred to as sectoral working groups. That means government side and stakeholders, so society, business, academia, working in one sector, such as agriculture or so, and with combinations of the 2 in terms of sustainable development councils. There has been governance learning. For example, we did that, and then there were certain elements missing, so we are now doing it this way. So that is really, on the first question of our outline, that is really lessons that can be learned from these countries. And the 5th, I missed that out, that was actually an early one, that similarly there is experience with sustainable development strategies and other overarching strategies that is clear and recognized that something like this for central steering is needed. There is experience, and the message here is in order to have such a strategy as an active one, as a living strategy, it needs to have measurements, and of course underpinning governance, which I just addressed, but measurements, everybody to have homework to do, and monitoring and reporting. And there is a little link to this priority setting, which again then links to this long-term strategies and short-term government cycles. There was one experience that from a sustainable development strategy, around 50% was implemented, so was really an active one. That was because that was the overlap with the government priorities. So eventually you have to work sequentially to cover then all of your strategy according to government cycles. And of course, you also always have to work upstream with an opportunity, like in Serbia, an election is coming up. So as early as possible, get this thinking in the priorities of the new government. Anything else?
Okay, thanks, Ine. Anything to add from the group? Or any questions of clarification for Inge? Okay, if not, then we should go to Janos.
Thank you, Marco. Well, just for change, I will go in a different sequence of order than in here. We will be based on the original questions, but then dwelling on some points, and I'll be quick. Whether the transition, the recent transition in Central and Eastern Europe is something to be heavily exploited during the SDG implementation. First of all, there was a certain agreement in the group that actually there's not one transition, there were two transitions in the Central and Eastern European region, because the transition around the 90s to democracy and market economy was a big one, big enough one, but then the transition, the accession to the European Union was at least as big as the first one, and the experiences were different. And if there is one lesson which emerged from the group was, as far as I heard it, was that for one transitions, these countries were better prepared than for the other. So while the first one came in a sudden, unexpected way, and there was no political class, no business class, no nothing, and society at large were ill-prepared for the changes, the accession to the EU was a much more guided and systematic process, having had its difficulties, but still the necessary information awareness raising and interaction during the process made it very, very different from the first transition. So the prepared, unprepared is a big difference, and if nothing else, then this can certainly be taken away from this region, that if the SDGs are transforming our Earth, are about transformation, then certainly they will need a thorough preparation. Now the one part of this thorough preparation is certainly the public participation in the largest sense, i.e. awareness raising with the public, awareness raising with stakeholders, communication, inter-stakeholder communication about what the changes are, about what the SDGs are, what is the content, what was the process which bore fruit to this new program, and having enough discussion, enough penetration of that to society so that an ownership can develop. So the capacity building side of it is very, very important. I can only second what Inge has said on the capacity building side. It was emphasized, I recall three now, I'm jumping over two and I will come back to it. Capacity building needs are at all levels. So the youngest must not be ignored, but civil society or civil service as such, the existing civil service, will also need a lot of catching up and information because we need, in a way, a generalist view. So specialists will not do it just by themselves. So public participation and the capacity building efforts up front in the SDG implementation process are something very important. Capacity building also includes exchanging experiences and exchanging and comparing notes about existing SD strategies to have a certain gap analysis of what needs to be added and how existing strategies need to be complemented. Sustainability science and the role of science in general in future policy making for the SDG implementation is also an interesting issue which came up at different points of the discussion. We had warnings again about the objective framework conditions, the non-negotiables, which are on the environmental side and the resource availability side of the sustainability question. Certainly there are certain framework possibilities and non-negotiables on the social side as well. What would be the best options for increased institutional cooperation? Do we need new institutions? Do we need new types of institutions? Again, the understanding was that one of the features of the SDGs, similar to the Agenda 21, but unlike the MDGs, for instance, it's their comprehensiveness and a very, very high degree of interconnectedness between different targets under different goals. So a target under a certain goal is in fact facilitating the implementation of several other goals. And we would need a critical mass of people in all stakeholder groups, eminently in the civil service, but in all stakeholder groups as well, who understand this feature, who understand the system, who are generalists, if you want, from this point of view, who can have this systems approach. It's not that specialists will not be needed in the future, but we must add this cementing and connecting quality to civil service and to other walks of life. The idea came up very briefly whether brand new institutions are needed for the SDG implementation. There were suggestions that the EC and the EU in general would be requested to look at their role, because certainly the institutional responsibility for SDG implementation must be there at the EU level, at the member state level, and then within member states, of course, and lower governance levels as well. And it remains to be seen whether this requires new institutions or the present ones would fit. But whatever the central institution responsible for SDG implementation, it must be a high-level one, and it must be a certain central piece. The question of what kinds of watchdogs are needed, what kinds of checks and balances are needed for this long-term view and long-term implementation remains, of course, open and remains a very interesting question. Coming to the issue of the low-hanging fruits and the immediate possibilities, we heard that in certain countries there are already goals picked for quick starting, quick implementation, like in Hungary, NGOs lobbying for a quick start of the water goal, and in fact several political forces in Hungary are also already behind a quick start to the water goal. But there were warnings that this must not mean leaving any goals behind. By the end of the period, by the end of the 15 years, we certainly would have to deal with all goals, pay attention to all of the goals. Still, of course, you have to start somewhere, first things first. But again, connected to the scientific questions, it was an interesting little discourse around what are the first things, whether they are defined by political opportunity or economic opportunity, or should they be defined by objective scientific urgency of the problem. So these are in very brief the thoughts around the room which I tried to capture, and these are just headlines. The conversation was much more rich. I have several pages full, so I will turn to the colleagues from the EU member states for any comments or additions to what I was able to deliver here.
Thank you, Janos. So, any comments or questions from the group? I think you covered everything just perfect. Okay, so it seems to be it's my turn now to try and pull some of these points together in a short way. So I was taking notes. I was synthesizing quickly as I was listening to these summaries, and I was rolling over the comments that I heard over the last day and a half, which I believe was a very interesting and very rich discussion on many levels. As both Inge and certainly Janos followed the questions, I'm not going to just repeat what they said. I'm going to pick up on actually 6 points that I think in many ways, resonate with your questions, but they stand out for me as maybe sort of emblematic of the issues that we were discussing that I think are critical. So I think there is certainly a question of institutions, and institutions in many different ways. It's a question of, do we need new institutions to be in charge of this strategy? What their roles should be, and what would be the role of existing institutions institutional coordination was also an issue, and as many remarked, many countries already have either a history or even an existing set of institutions that are dealing with the issues, or that could be or should be dealing with the issues. Starting, of course, in our case with the EU, and we also talked about the question of how should the roles and responsibilities be allocated, and what should be the role of what should be the link between institutions at these different levels. So, given the existing mandates of these institutions, of course, this is very very important and can be a delicate question. From my perspective, one thing that really stands out as important there is the question of ownership. Because it's clear that SDGs are very broad, they affect many actors, and this type of ownership has to be there at the end of the day, at all levels and in all sectors. So that takes me to my second point after institutions, which is about the process, because I think process involvement, engagement is very important for developing ownership. And in the institutions that see their relevance in the SDG process, they need to be engaged. They need to develop ownership through that process. And I think that process needs to go on at different levels. We also talked about, we heard about the importance of bottom-up. So there will be a role, of course, for institutions like the EU, but bottom-up groups, including citizen groups, NGOs, non-government organizations, business, will be very important. And many of them actually are not waiting for higher-level organizations, entities, to take the lead. Just in the case of Hungary, actually the Hungarian Business Council for Sustainable Development took the lead, and without waiting for a higher level mandate, they very actively started a process to discuss with their members SDGs. So now from process I would go to content. And content, when I mean on content here, is the actual SDGs that have been defined at the global level and in a certain way, but as we go to countries and regions, they have to be interpreted, adapted, and owned at that level. So from the perspective of content, there was a discussion about criteria, how to decide how the SDGs apply to the given country. What are the criteria that we should use to decide what SDGs to pick, and how to make sure that when we pick the low-hanging fruit, we are not forgetting that it's actually the entire set of SDGs that's important. In fact, as in our group János pointed out, the SDGs are actually a minimum level that was possible, a minimum from the political perspective. So there are, of course, many other issues that should be in the SDGs, and that probably will arise in given countries. So the SDGs should be seen probably more just as a minimum and not a limitation. So content is very important, and clarity of the SDGs. From that, I would go to capacity and knowledge. So, capacity and knowledge of the institutions, governmental, non-governmental, and others who are in charge of implementation, and from the perspective of knowledge, the role of science. And as several speakers pointed out, there are trends out there that come with some fairly difficult and hard realities that need to be taken into account, and we need to convert this knowledge into practices and transition processes at the different levels. Capacity is also needed in terms of finance, in terms of technical capacity and new knowledge, in terms of innovation. And there's a lot to do, as we've seen from some of the charts on eco-innovation. Particularly this region is really has a lot of potential to catch up. My next point, and that's my sixth point, is on monitoring, learning, and the importance of evidence, which to some extent, of course, builds on science. But it also goes beyond that, because monitoring, learning is an important process itself at different levels. It's important at the individual citizen level, it's important for the school system up to the universities, it's important for training already working level experts and officials. Actually, I would even say that it's also important to unlearn. So learning is important, but that unlearning unsustainable practices socially and individually is just as important. So, and deciding on what to learn and what to unlearn itself is an interesting and important question. There will be, at the UN level and at the country level, there will be reporting processes. At the end of the day, after some time, you know, so to speak, the taxman will come and discuss what have you done, what have you achieved. You know, in the political system that comes at the time of elections, in our case, more symbolically, I would say it comes in the form of the next generation or the next generations. Because what we do here, as Ajay Kastenberg was often referring to, it's going to be our kids and grandkids. That's where this accountability really starts to bite. So we have to be aware of that, and this has to also have mechanisms, reporting, monitoring mechanisms, and accountability mechanisms. If we go off track, do we have the capacity? Do we have the vision? Do we have the energy to adjust course? Because it will happen. I mean, just let's admit it. It will happen. We're not going to get it right. That's for sure. The issues are too complex. We can't deal with everything. In one shot. So this ability to learn, this ability for course correction and adaptation, I think is going to be very important. And actually, I think it makes the task perhaps a little easier. If there's a pressure that we have to get it perfectly, and we can't get it perfectly right off the bat, that's a huge pressure. If we approach this with some flexibility, at least, not saying that it's okay to fail, but with this ability to learn, I think that would be important individually and also for institutions as institutional learning. And I just lost my screen. My last point was on ambition and sustainability. So it's clear that SDGs are very ambitious. In the individual countries, we have to be both ambitious in the same way and honest about just how far we can go and then push ourselves beyond our limits. Sustainability itself, I'm not just talking about sustainability then of the outcomes. I also think, and I think that came out from the comments, sustainability of the effort. There were many sustainable development strategies and secretariats and institutions that we had starting from Brundtland, that are no longer with us. They disappeared for a reason. I think we need effort that doesn't have the same fate. We need effort that lasts, that's effective, and that will give us results. So I think results is a good place to stop. So that's what we want. And then now I'm going to pass the mic to Carl Falkenberg for his closing comments.
Well, I just want to thank you all. I wanted to have this exchange with you. I wanted to hear how you are looking at SDGs. selfishly, I wanted to draw on your appreciation, your assessment, your intelligence, and you've given me a lot of food to take back to Brussels. I think I'm going back very much reassured that we have, throughout the European Union, a real understanding that the SDGs are an ambitious agenda for change, that you are as convinced as I have been and as other European member states are that it's going to be a challenging task, but that we will have to face it, that we need to think in terms of governance, that we need to make sure that we set up structures where we can look at the three aspects of sustainable development, not simply leaving sustainability in the environmental corner, but making it very plain and very clear that sustainability has an environmental aspect but covers social challenges, aspects, questions, and economic issues, and that we have to address these three collectively, and that we have to find pathways forward that allow to address these three in conjunction. I have very clearly heard also that there is an understanding that the commitment to SDGs is a commitment at European level, but a commitment at national level. Each one of the 28 member states has signed up to the UN definition of sustainable development goals and has a responsibility to deliver. We still need to think through exactly how we can best organize a governance structure within a European level that does justice to those issues that we better deal collectively at European level, and those issues that are better in a well-understood subsidiarity approach dealt with at the national or even subnational levels. I've also taken back from here that there is a widely shared understanding that implementation of the SDGs and implementation of this agenda of change is going to require some element of top-down governance, but that at least equally important, it needs bottom-up participation, ownership by all groups of society, from businesses to academic and science, to youth, to different NGOs and the broad civil society. We need to really understand that this is a political challenge for all of us, and that we all have to buy in. I've heard a lot of statements that show me that within this region there is already a lot of buy-in to ownership at the different levels, and I'm now taking all this back to Brussels to mull in my corner and see whether there is a way in which we can describe this that everyone in the end is going to sign up to. Thank you very much.
I think, Marta, it's your turn to close the meeting.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm looking around in the room, and I would like to say that I don't envy Mr. Malkever, because in this room you are talking to the converted. In the room where you are going back to, you are going to be talking to the non-converted. And to talk to that kind of audiences, you need a lot of ammunition.
Like a challenge.
So this is one of the things I wanted to offer, that of course our support is always with you. The second thing, in this room, a couple of years ago, we had a very good training by Dennis Meadows. And Dennis was, you know that he's very famous for the limits to growth, was saying that, you know, there is something that we always have to keep in mind. And what is keep in mind is that we are all born with different kind of habits. And when the way how you cross your hand is a habit, and if you want to do it the other way around, try it. So cross your hand, all of you, please. And then try to do it the other way around. To try to cross that. You see that so when we talk about sustainability and about changes, please remember and try to do this other way around. And that means a lot for the whole society. So we have to be very open when we are looking into it. And it's not only a challenge, but an opportunity. And the more you are going to be able to translate for the business, for the politicians, and repackage it as an opportunity and as a forward-looking concept for really development with a better social structure and a better environment. So the end result is a better social structure and a better environment. The better is going to be for all of us sitting around these tables and also around the world at other ends. So I would like to make a promise that we will try to encourage, because many of you said that, is this one-off? But I'm thinking about that maybe at our General Assembly, which is once a year, we can have some kind of similar stimulated half-a-day exercise going around, through which we can actually see where we are and where we could be for the future. And maybe that could be a nice milestone. We have 32 countries around the table. We have a lot of stakeholders who are part of us. So around 80 to 100 people can actually think about it, where we are, where we should be, and where we could be together. So for me, from all the sustainable development goals, all the horizontal integration, all getting out of the different channels and different silos, the most important is partnership. Because I think that, and an inclusive partnership. So I think that that's the message. And with that, I'm inviting you to a very interactive partnership for lunch. And hopefully to continue and exchange these ideas. And not to stop here, but with the messages that we are going to be synthesizing, partly sharing it with Carl and the group there, partly taking it across other channels and partnerships across Europe and beyond. Maybe we will be able to mobilize much more action. Thank you very much.
This is beyond the program. This is just an announcement that I forgot to mention, that at 4 o'clock this afternoon, I'm facilitating a webinar organized by the Integrated Assessment Society and the International Institute for Sustainable Development on beyond SDG indicators, integrated models, supporting implementation, strategy development, and transition planning. So we will decide we would stay probably sit in the library. So if anyone wants to join us, you're welcome to. We already have about 70 people signed up from around the world, and we will have 3 speakers from the UN Division for UN Millennium Institute, and the Dutch Environmental Assessment Agency. So talking about how integrated modeling and assessment can be and is practically used for SDG implementation planning. Thank you.